All right, I think we're going to begin. I think you've all been kind and patient, and I see some people already intrigued and trying a few things out. So yeah, workshop weekend, the Lockpick Village from TOOL. And this has generated quite an array of interest and some press. We weren't expecting that. But we hope that this course and this afternoon of learning will be enlightening and also assuaging, is that the word I want to look for? In the face of a lot of concern and a lot of misunderstanding, everyone is still here, and we're really, really glad about that. There was some, as I mentioned earlier, there was some press interest and media interest in this class, so I don't know if anyone from the press or media is here. We told them they were all very welcome. We made extra room. We are doing some filming and recording where there's some little snapping photos here and there. At any time, if anyone is uncomfortable with their picture or photo, or you have your kids here and you don't want your kids winding up on the news, please just let us know, or just say that to anyone at all, and everyone will respect your wishes. But all of our events are public. All of the things TOOL does is open to anyone who wants to learn. So welcome. And we thank Workshop Weekend and all the organizers who brought us out here. So a big hand for everything they've been putting together. So yeah, we are here from TOOL. TOOL is the open organization of lockpickers. We are a broad spectrum of people who work in a lot of different industries and a lot of different fields. Some of us work with locks in our daily lives. Some of us do professional security work. And other people are everyone from firemen to dentists to knitting aficionados. You name it, TOOL will accept anyone who wants to learn and who wants to be forthright in kind of discovering this world of interesting mechanical puzzles. So we will tell you more about us as we go along, and we will answer any questions you have as we go along. But for now, we just kind of want to dive right into a lot of things. So, why do locks matter? Why do locks resonate with us the way they do? It's kind of an interesting question, and it's pretty hard to deny. Even if you didn't ever think about picking locks before the workshop weekend, chances are you, like most people, I find locks pretty fascinating. Especially old locks, antique locks. If you ever see things like flea market, they're like, oh, come look at this. How old is this from? And the vendor is like, I don't know, I found it in another flea market. But we like old locks, or even old keys, right? How many people have seen locks or keys used in jewelry or decorating before? It's just something that captivates us, and people have this attachment. And they don't always have a good way of describing it, but everyone finds locks kind of neat, I think. And this was really driven home, the question of what locks represent to us. I love this story that was told by a friend of ours, a boy named Skyler. He used to be with TOOL on the leadership board. He's now done a lot of other independent projects, but he gave a talk called, "Why Do You Lock Your Door?" And it was, if you have a chance, write this down, look on YouTube. Why Do You Lock Your Door was a video from the, I guess it was RVA-Sec down in Virginia last year. Skylar Town is his name. And he's a real passionate guy. He's a delight to watch. He brings this energy to all of his speeches. And he tells historical tales and the history of different lock mechanisms. And in this talk, towards the end, in fact, in the Q&A, someone said, Skylar, this is so fascinating, and I hadn't really thought about a lot of this before. Why do locks represent so many things to all of us? And he kind of said the following, and I'm doing my best to do justice to his words, but he described it thusly. He said, I want you to picture a situation, and I'm going to give you a few hypotheticals, and put yourself literally in this situation and think about how you would feel. You're going to meet someone. Maybe you're a college student and the professor for a class you want to take says, yeah, we might be able to fit you in, come to my office at 3 p.m. Or maybe you're going to rent an apartment or a new building space and the landlord says, yeah, meet me at this address, come on in, I'll be there around 11 a.m. Or whatever reason, you're meeting someone somewhere, you're going to someone else's space, and you're supposed to go. You're supposed to meet them there. So let's say you arrive and there's a door and it's just hanging open. And you're supposed to be visiting someone there, right? Well, most people, you do it this one. You're like, knock, hello? Are you here? And you kind of walk in. You're like, hello? I wonder if this person's here. Yeah, I'm here. Oh, you're on your way? Okay, fine. Because the door was open, right? It was just, you're supposed to be going somewhere, and there's the door, it's open. We wouldn't think too much about that. You might, as I say, you might stop and kind of knock and be like, oh, I guess this is number 40, right? Yeah, I'm in the right place. But it's an open door. So it means something to us, but you'd probably walk in, I'm guessing. And if that door were closed, just a plain door, no lock or anything on it, again, you'd probably knock, you might take your phone out and call, be like, yeah, are you here? No, you come. I should go right in? You should? All right, well, yeah, I'll sit on the couch. You wait for someone. Now, imagine, a little bit different. Imagine the door is shut and it's locked. And sure enough, you're supposed to be going into this room or building, and you say, hello? Yeah, I got here already. Oh, there's a key, like, under the mat? What would you do then? Probably, I could go in. Well, how far away are you? I'll wait. I'll be outside. I'm going to get some coffee. Because locks kind of mean something. Even though you're on the phone with the person whose building it is, and they're saying, nah, go on in. The locks represent something. And even if that doesn't quite click, I love the way that Skylar kind of ended. He said, imagine it is an open door, literally hanging open, but there's a lock in it. Now, what you would do, whether you would go in or not or wait outside, that's everyone's own personal flavor. But I'll bet, he said, that door means something different to you than this door did. Even though it was wide open, the fact that there's a lock in it, it means something else in how we treat space and property and where we are versus where is someone else's territory. So locks mean really special things to us, and they resonate with us in a lot of ways. And that's why, at least for us, that's why we find them intriguing, that's why we want to explore them, and that's why we respect them, frankly, whenever you encounter them in your daily lives. So hopefully that kind of gives you a little insight, at least for a few of us, of why we find these little mechanisms so unique. Come on in, come on in. And if any of you are like us, how many people enjoyed puzzles when they were growing up, right? I have so many memories of sitting around the kitchen table with my family as a little kid, taking out the big Milton Bradley puzzles. You know, this wouldn't be a very good puzzle, I guess. It would be probably easy to solve. Anybody know what the name of that painting is? No? Anybody know the artist of that painting?
Magritte.
Yeah, all right. I heard a lot of people say Magritte. Very nice. How many people had like 3D puzzles? You know, I see a lot of hands again. They're fun, right? Or these sort of brain bender metal puzzles. In TOOOL and in the lock sport community, locks are no different than these. We view locks as fun puzzles to be explored. And we trade them and we say, oh my God, I was just in Germany and my buddy, he showed me this, and I got an extra one. You want to try this out? It's really hard. You might have to push it this way and try it this way. And at a TOOOL meeting or any other lock sport meeting, that's what you see. You see people just treating locks like puzzles to be dissected and solved. And if you've never thought of them that way, hopefully you will all leave with that in mind after this workshop. Most of all, that's at the heart of what we do. We do this because lockpicking is fun. We think it's intriguing, we think it's enlivening, and it's when you have this real aha kind of moment when it works, we think it's a hoot. And if you come around to other larger conferences, maker fairs and hackercons and all kind of tech conferences, wherever you see TOOOL or other lock sporting groups, you'll see games, you'll see people winning prizes, you'll see people getting fun giveaways and things. So take this knowledge and see if there's any lockpicking activity happening in your area. There's a routine chapter of TOOOL that meets in the Bay Area. There are, like the Maker Fair. Has anyone ever gone to Maker Fair? Oh my God, that's about most of the hands, not all the hands. If you haven't come to a Maker Fair, please seek out these hands-on activity days, which Workshop Weekend is a great example of. Because we think it's a really great thing to not just sit around and watch TV. The competition can get really serious, by the way. A lot of people, they see people just sort of sitting around at, let's say, a Maker Fair. They go, oh wow, this lockpicking thing is right next to how to brew your own beer and how to knit with yarn and how to, I don't know what they're doing over there. Wasn't that frogs? You know, it kind of looks like a fun thing, but there are international competitions, a lot of prestige, a lot of trash talk at times between the Dutch and the Germans usually. TOOOL organizes these events, and we have people flying in from all over the world, just seeing head-to-head who can be faster, who can be more innovative. You might get to see some clips of these sort of competitions as we go along. For the record, I lost this competition. Yeah, there's Rance, there's Walter. This is actually, this shot here is in a place called Lockmaster Security Institute down in Nicholasville, Kentucky. They are affiliated with the Sargent and Greenleaf Safe Manufacturing Factory. They are the premier institute for locksmith and government training in the United States. And they hosted this TOOOL event. It's roughly akin to if you had friends and you had like a forensics club. Like, we watched CSI, and then we learned it's all fake, so we made our own forensics club. And you wanted to have like a little forensics gathering, and the FBI saying, well, we've got this great facility at Quantico, you should come here. That was what it felt like when Lockmasters told us, hey, if you're going to have LockCon, the big competition in America, you're going to have it in the US, come down to Lockmasters. We were blown away. It was a tremendous honor. And we were very happy, and we'll be back there in the future. They loved having us. But right now, we just want to diving right into this, we want to give you an intro to how lockpicking works. And this whole workshop all day will be a series of mini lessons, and then some hands-on and some questioning. So please, the whole time as we start teaching you, please start to dive in, and you'll see it's not that hard to understand. There are two very important rules that we should convey when we start out, along with the rule that I said earlier, that everyone is welcome at a TOOOL event, as long as you're above board and you're not trying to just kind of slip in and say, oh, I'm going to be shady. I mean, you don't see people like that. I don't know what the press or what everyone expected to see when you came here today, given this crazy atmosphere of news coverage, but I see a bunch of smiling faces. I see families with kids. I see everyone just introducing each other. And by the way, my name is Dave, or Brian if you want. We have our nicknames, but everyone knows me as either. But Deviant, Dr. Tran, Mike, Christina. Ask us anything you want. We'll be very open with you about everything, especially these two rules. If you follow these two rules, it is virtually impossible to get yourself in any kind of trouble with this activity. We'll talk a lot about the law later, because people always have law questions, and we'll answer them to the best of our ability. The two golden rules of lockpicking. 1, do not pick locks that you don't own. And we mean that in a pretty restrictive way. Let's say you're a student in a dorm room. Let's say you rent an apartment somewhere, or a townhouse. You might have a key, and you're an authorized user of a lock. But I would guess that in those situations, you would not really be the owner of the lock. Put another way, if you have a lock that stops working, and you have to call a locksmith, are you handing your credit card to the locksmith? If you are not, I think you don't own that lock. So, you do not pick locks that you don't personally own, without, of course, express permission. You have our permission to pick all of these locks here. And going hand in hand with that idea of locks, whether they're on your front door, you say, well, I don't rent, I own. I'm sorry in this real estate market that you own a home, but even if it is your own lock and you own it, you bought it outright. If it's your own front door, it's probably the lock on which you rely every day. And that's rule 2. Don't pick locks that you rely on for security. It is possible, albeit not likely, but it's possible that picking a lock or manipulating a lock can cause it to behave improperly. It can get stuck, it can even, hopefully not, get damaged. If it's just a practice lock on a table in front of you, you kind of raise your hand and go, hey, TOOOL person with a shirt, something's not right. If it's your own front door, and you were like, oh, I learned this is fun, and then it doesn't turn all the way, and you're like, oh my god, I gotta get to work. You don't want to be in that situation. So, do not pick locks that you don't own without express permission, and do not pick locks on which you rely, unless it's some kind of emergency, I don't know. If you got no other way, if you can't get your door open, I guess you can try to pick it. I wouldn't recommend it. Follow those 2 rules and you're fine. There are fundamentally 3 types or categories of lock opening. And if you understand this, you'll be very well equipped to explain to people, oh, you went to that workshop? I read all about that in this very awful article in the San Francisco Chronicle. That was a bad thing, wasn't it awful? This is the best kind of summary I can give you when people don't understand lock sport. Why we talk about the 3 kinds of lock opening. Hopefully this will make it a little clearer. There is lock picking. That is the theme of the day. There is what we might call quick and dirty entry. things like bypassing or physical breaking of a lock or bumping. If anyone's ever heard of using a bump key, we'll talk about that a little bit. And then there's, covert or high-tech kind of entry. Lockpicking is what we do. That is what TOOOL members do. That is what Lockpick villages are about. Quick and dirty entry is occasionally what a criminal might do. Most of them won't even do that. They'll just break a window. And those high-tech things, that's kind of what spies do, James Bond type stuff. Or maybe a few of us in our professional careers. Some of us do what is called security audit work. And we basically teach companies whether they're doing the right thing. But of these three categories, think of it thusly. Lockpicking is what TOOOL is happy to educate people about and provide the means. TOOOL provides equipment, TOOOL provides practice locks, TOOOL will give you all the means to enjoy lockpicking. Quick and dirty entry, TOOOL will help share knowledge because it's important that you are educated about certain weaknesses that may be in your own home. TOOOL does not provide the means to execute those attacks. We do not sell bump keys, we don't manufacture them, we don't sell bypass tools. So hopefully that makes sense. And the high-tech stuff, some of us, as I say, have knowledge of some of this world because of our professional work, but TOOOL generally shies away from both the knowledge and offering of any means to do high security attacks. All you're learning today is how to open locks that are little mechanical puzzles in front of you. What criminals might do with a lock, we will tell you how to guard against it, but you won't really have any means or ability when you leave this workshop. And judging from the faces on all the families with kids in this room, none of you came here looking for that knowledge, so we're pleased by that. So, anytime you ask us a question, we will answer it to the best of our abilities. If one of our answers seems incomplete or a little nebulous, maybe it's because you're asking about something that's a little too high-tech, a little too high security, at which point we will tell you if a lock is maybe good or bad, but we won't give you all of the details, let's say to compromise a Medico lock or something like that. And that's just part of what we do. If you have any connection to the tech world, it's something called responsible disclosure, or disclosing of vulnerabilities. We've talked to manufacturers and say, hey, there's a problem with this one product of yours, but you don't just broadcast that out to anyone. Now, right into the hands-on. Lockpicking as an activity, as a puzzle-solving kind of sport, lockpicking is pretty easy to understand. This will all make sense to you very quickly, and if you start trying it out, it might start to work, but to actually get good at lockpicking, it takes a while. We like to say the 3 O's in TOOOL represent the fact that you have to practice over and over and over again to get really, really good in this area. So, diving right in. The locks you see every day, the locks you use every day in your lives. Whether you're talking about a doorknob, maybe a padlock hanging on a hasp like this, a deadbolt, mortise. Those are all very different form factors of lock. They all look like different installations. But the mechanism actually, in all of those photos, and the mechanism in all of the locks on this table, even though they look different, the mechanism is the same. It is called the pin tumbler design, and it's a design that's been with us for a century or more. The original pin tumbler design by Linus Yale and his son Linus Yale Jr. has been with us since the turn of the century and has remained relatively unchanged until recently. And even still, even though minor innovations have popped up, most of the locks that you'll encounter, just your dime store, hardware store locks, are of this variety. And we'll get some terms straight, and then we'll show you mechanically what's happening with these locks, and then you'll see how it's possible to solve them like little puzzles. So this beige bit out here, that is the housing of the lock. The brassy part here, the round part that turns when you're operating the lock, that is called the plug. And if you look down the keyway of the plug, and all of you have locks in front of you, you look down, try to angle it just right to look into those keyways, you'll probably see another bit of metal, mostly brass-colored metal, deep in the keyway. What you're actually seeing is one of the many pins in the lock. Many of you might know that they're called pin tumbler locks because there's pins in there doing something. But if you've never taken a lock apart, what you wouldn't realize is this is actually what's happening in a conventional lock. The pin tumbler mechanism is a series of 2 pins. Here from the outside again, you can barely see this one that we show in red in our diagrams. That's called the key pin. On the key pin, there's another pin up here shown in blue, normally never visible from the outside. And that blue pin is called the driver pin. And the driver pin is what actually holds the lock shut. So right now, no key in the lock. Try to turn the plug. It will not turn. That's because the driver pin is in the way. The driver pin is what we might call binding. It's blocking the rotation of the plug. And it will do this no matter how that lock is facing, whether it's on its side, whether it's what we would call upside down. Does anybody travel around the world? If you've ever been, especially to parts of Europe, the locks over there are all mounted what American eyes would consider upside down. The bitting, the teeth of the key face down. That's fine though, because this spring keeps the pin stack, that's what this is all called together, keeps the pin stack at rest like this. And only if you have the right key, that you insert a key in the lock, will the blade of the key ride in there in the keyway, pushing against the key pin, which of course in turn pushes the driver pin, to just the right height, allowing this break point between those 2 pins, it's called the shear line, allowing the shear line to be aligned just at the edge of the plug, thus permitting the plug to turn. Mechanically, does this make sense? You now fundamentally understand most of the dime store locks that are out there. They're not complicated mechanisms internally. The one thing you can't see from this forward view perspective is the fact that it's an array of pin stacks. A lock will have a series of pin stacks all in a row, all functioning the same way, all doing the same thing. So here we see these red pins, these key pins with driver pins on them and springs. In fact, the only difference from one chamber, from one stack to the next, is the height of those the height of those key pins, those red pins. And they have different heights because they correspond to the different cut depths on the blade of the key. That's called the bitting of the key. If the bitting is correct, when the key is inserted into the lock, the pin stacks ride along the whole blade, and when the key lands home, finally hits where it belongs, all of those shear lines are at the edge of the plug, and that can turn. Does that make sense? And if you have so much as one pin stack out of position, that's enough to prevent it from turning. Here we see this one cut is a little too deep, so that driver pin is binding. What if that same cut were too shallow? Well, a key pin, a red pin, will bind just as effectively. So all of those pin stacks have to be at just the right height. They can't be too high, can't be too low. The thing about locks and how they are manufactured, and why lock picking is possible, has to do with the fact that essentially we live in the real world. We don't live in a fantasy land with, let's say, like Star Trek replicators, where if you want to make something and it suddenly materializes down to the molecule perfectly built. This is a lock in like the perfect idealized world. Here we have the plug. Imagine the lock has been disassembled and the pins are all dumped out. So you're looking at the plug down from above. All of these chambers are drilled exactly the same shape, perfectly aligned. All of those pins, perfectly the same shape, perfectly the same diameter. I mean, that's what we would want, right? There's some guy building, a lock. He's going to have a CAD diagram, and everything is flush and true and lined up. But how many of you have ever actually fabricated something? Have you, tried to drill into a curved surface ever? How many of you have ever maybe talked to tech shop or a place where they say, yeah, we can make you this part. What are your tolerances? What is your error range? Because you pay for how tolerant, your drilling is. Manufacturers that are selling things, they have the same questions they deal with every day. How much money is this going to cost to produce? How much error can I have and still have this thing work correctly? So, in a perfect world with everything aligned, just so and just true, no key in the lock, try to turn that plug like you saw on the front view. You'd have binding, but you'd have all those pins binding because those driver pins, none of them are at the right height, correct? But remember manufacturing tolerances and manufacturing errors. This is a brand new lock. Stripped apart, photos. Yes?
May I take over from you for just a few moments
Sure.
on this part and you speak to our friends at KGO?
I can.
Beautiful.
You can keep on going, man.
Hey, you guys. If you give me 30 seconds, I'll tell a story about why you shouldn't pick other people's locks.
Yeah.
Sure.
That would be great. Thanks.
Pardon me for a second.
Okay. Fascinating. I've actually never used this before, so it's a good learning experience for all of us. So in the real world, as Doug was saying, you have lines that are running quickly, you have drill bits that are worn down, you have imperfections that are produced when locks are made, especially inexpensive locks, like the majority of locks that we buy when we walk into a hardware store, like any common one. These same thing happens with the pins that are in the lock. These are driver pins right here. They get pitted sometimes, and these imperfections result, as far as the drilling goes, in the alignment of these boars in the plug that are actually not. So they're not actually perfectly aligned. You get a little bit of a jagged wall. What that means for us is it creates a vulnerability in the lock that, oops, wrong button. It creates a vulnerability that is called pin binding. And what happens, as we turn the plug in this side view, to rotate the plug, that brighter yellow part, one of the pin stacks will actually hit the internal housing of the lock before the others as they all rotate in the direction. And we call that the binding pin stack. And that, as we work with our tools, is actually the first pin stack we're going to look for. So what happens when you raise up that binding pin stack, in any of the pin stacks that are binding, that first binding pin stack, or any of the pin stacks that are binding, is that you trap the blue pin, the driver pin, above the lip of the plug right there, as you raise up that entire pin stack. The key pin, the red pin then, can move freely within the plug, can drop right back down like that. And having those driver pins, the blue pins out of the way, one by one, as we set the stacks into the right position that the key would normally set them into, allows us to open the lock. So what we're going to work on today is using the tools that you have in front of you. Yes, the hook tool and the L-shaped turning tool. And we're going to place them into the lock. We're going to explore these pin stacks, feeling each of the pin stacks and looking for the pin stack that is binding. So now that we're free to the binding pin stacks, another pin stack is going to bind. And you are going to find that and work on that one. I know it's sometimes it's a little bit of a weird transition, me to Deb, but does anybody have any questions so far? Yes?
So when I pick one up, I can actually see I'm picking it up. Then the L thing shape jerks and the thing goes back down.
When we work with you individually, as soon as we take a break, and we can look at that together. Any other questions? Yes.
Are there always 5 pins?
No, not always. Sometimes there are 4 pins, 4 pin stacks.
This one is 1.
Sometimes there are 3, right. Sometimes in some of the practice locks you have in front of you, there's 1 pin stack, even though there's 5 holes. Most common locks will have, most common door locks will have 5 pin stacks. Some higher security locks will have 6. I even have some at home that have 7. So
padlocks tend to be 4. Trunk, like suitcase locks, tend to be 3. You know, and yeah, it could just be any number. The point is that you have no idea until you get in there what it is that you're working with.
And sense of feel, exploring with that hook tool or any other tools that you have at your disposal is really what's going to allow you to know how many pin stacks there are and feel your way through the lock. Because when you look into a lock, you can only see that pin stack that's immediately at the front. Now, one of the things that we're going to want to watch out for as we lift pin stacks is overlifting. And And that is the case where you lift up a pin stack, a binding pin stack, so high that the driver pin, blue, actually gets trapped between, I'm sorry, the key pin rather, gets trapped between the plug and the housing now. And you can see that one on the far end is trapped, and that is going to prevent you from opening the lock. By releasing a little bit of pressure on your tuning tool, you can often allow that to drop back into that overlifted pin stack to drop into place. Other tools that are common, and I think that you probably have in front of some of you, yes, there are a few of them around, are rakes. Raking is a different kind of attack on tumbler locks. And what it does is take advantage of physics to essentially set all the pin stacks at the same time. So instead of the skilled attack that is single pin picking, raking is rather a motion where there's less skill involved. And it's also less reliable, and in the case of high security locks, it simply doesn't work in a lot of cases. Additional tools that, so the hook as such, and then in the middle, this is a half diamond tool. This is actually sort of a hybrid. And you can either rake with this tool or lift individual pin stacks. And again, that rake on the end, that one's actually one of my favorites. It's very good for padlocks. It's an S rake. As I said, you can lift with a half diamond as well as rake, or you can even sort of shovel back and forth.
But this is something that a lot of people, we try to reinforce, that the half diamond, it's probably the only tool that will ever have a fully flat edge in your kit. And in addition to being a pick, it's kind of this little exploring tool. Many of you may have seen that a lot of our locks have labels on them, you know, number 1, number 2, and did we cover that they have different amounts of pins yet? We'll probably show them in the intro section there.
Please.
Yeah.
1 is 1 pin.
Yeah, 1 is 1 pin, 2 is 2 pin. Well, if you ever encounter a lock that doesn't have a helpful label from someone like us, and you go, oh man, I wonder, I just bought this padlock, what do you think it's got in it? You can take your diamond tool upside down, reach in the lock, and lift all the pin stacks at once. And once they're all up like this, you can slowly retract your half diamond, and you'll actually hear kind of a snap, 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 as those pin stacks are dropping off the edge. Can I grab a half diamond right here somewhere? Is there, oh, there we go, I've got one there. So here is a security brand lock, whatever that means. And I got a pretty loud mouth, but if I were to be quiet for a second, maybe some of you up here can listen to this.
Oh yeah.
How many was that?
3.
There was, you heard, I was a little loud in the first one. It was actually 4. But again, you can try that with just about any lock that you don't know what's in the lock. You can try to hear these clicks.
Cool.
And the other type of tool, which you saw in some of the animations, in addition to these pick tools, was the turning tool. The turning tool, this will sound kind of counterintuitive. I'm going to steal stuff from the table again. Turning tool is just, it's like a bent piece of metal. When people get pick kits, they go, oh, wow, man, look at this like James Bond stuff. That is so neat. I guess it comes with these. Whatever. And, these tools don't get a lot of fun attention. They're not as cool looking, right? This will sound counterintuitive, but try to process this. These tools and how you use them make all the difference in the world when you are picking. The lifters, the rakes, etc., they're just moving some stuff around. How you are disciplined and how you finesse this turning tool in the lock makes so much difference. Yes?
It's like the other tools are like trying to push up the things, while that tool is the stool.
Yes, that tool is providing the right pressure to make everything else behave the way it should. So we like to talk a lot about using the turning tool correctly. So right now, this photograph, this is a photo of what we'd call bad turning tool usage. And even if I wasn't up here telling you that, you might actually know this already. Because if you watch TV, especially late at night, you've seen infomercials. You can tell this person's in black and white. And if a person's in black and white, they are doing something wrong. They can't make the pasta, and their ironing is bad, and oh, I can't boil eggs. So yes, bad turning tool usage, because this person kind of has a finger hooked over the turning tool.
You said all the incompetence in the world of colorblind. Is that what you're telling me?
So yes, this sort of a hooking motion is not, in our opinion, usually an easy way to gauge your pressure. A pushing motion, a direct pushing with the finger, is usually a much more reliable way of using these turners. And of course, the further out down the edge that you push, the more you can really gauge and balance how much pressure you're using. In shorthand, think of it thusly. If your fingertip is a nice little fingertip color, you're doing a good job. If your fingertip is no longer fingertip colored, you are pushing way too hard, orders of magnitude too hard. And as Christina will tell you later on in the hands-on, she has an excellent tool that she might hold up for us. She devised this scale with a turning tool taped right onto it and helps you dial in. It will astound you how little pressure you need on that turning tool. Something like, if you could imagine a turning tool just floating out in space, the weight of a couple of coins. Think of a modern laptop keyboard, a membrane keyboard. Less pressure than you need to push a key on a keyboard is the amount of pressure you need on that turning tool. It will astound you how little pressure you want on that turning tool.
About half an ounce, maybe.
Yeah, half an ounce. And if you don't know what half an ounce is, that scale will show you, and you will be flabbergasted.
What is that in grams?
In grams? You've been in Switzerland this long, and you're already talking in grams. European syllables. So most of these turning tools are what we would call edge of the plug position. They fit in away from the pin stacks, and this long head pushes all the way into the keyway like this. That's most of these intro turning tools. Now that'll give you very good purchase in the keyway, but it does compromise your space a little bit. In these big, wide American keyways, it's not a real problem. The only problem you ever have to worry about is if your turning tool slips down and starts providing extra friction, kind of fouling up how gently you're trying to turn. There are, however, some specialized turning tools, what we might call flat tools or European tools. They go in the very center of the plug, and they go right up against those pins. Now, this obviously won't grab on as tightly, and some people have considered them a little harder to use. But they're popular, especially in very crinkly, tiny, like European keyway locks, because they give you more room to work. Ultimately, when we talk about turning the lock, people start asking, so which direction do I turn these? Simple rule of thumb, if you buy locks at the store and you want to practice on them, most padlocks will open clockwise. Most doorknob or door handle sets will open counterclockwise. Not all of them. The Schlage company recently changed their locks and started turning clockwise. And of course, a deadbolt or something like that, that's kind of a mystery. Because in the real world, if you're talking about an actual door, it depends how the door is hung. And if you're talking about a deadbolt just sitting on the table, well, it depends which way it's installed. It depends which way the lock is interacting with some other mechanism. For all of our practice locks, by the way, how many people, I usually at this point we ask who wants to try, but how many people have already been trying as we've been talking? Awesome!
4.
You got 4?
Yeah.
Solid, man! Yeah. So all of our locks that are sitting out here, you may have noticed, there is no tailpiece. It's not interacting with any larger mechanism. So these locks, these loose cores, they can turn either way. And many people don't even know this. These silver and blue banded master locks that you can get at the store, did you know they turn both ways? A lot of people never realize. I never knew that for years. So all of those locks are great starter locks, especially these loose cores that have labels. Some of you have already determined and figured out that those loose labels, those number 1, number 2, number 3, those are what we call progressive locks. And we actually pin them with pins missing. So lock number 1 literally just has 1 pin stack. And it's a great way to get the feel of the lock in your hand, get comfortable with it in your hand. Lock 2 has 2 pin stacks, and on and on and on.
How much the master set?
Yes.
One thing about these locks that I get asked very often.
So they're easy?
The keyway, you see these bottom parts? That's the front of the lock.
Oh, yes.
That's where you're going from. That stuff on the back, that's not where the lock is.
Can you flip to the webcam to show people how to
Ah,
do that? Fantastic, yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Alt tab. Windows 95 style.
There you go.
Oh, you have it.
I don't know, that was just close. Cool. All right. So yay. So this right here is the key, or the lock, where you're going. This is not.
Yeah, the ring, the screw cap, that's all the tailpiece.
Yeah, that's the back of the lock. You're not going to turn the lock that way. So you want to attack it from, you want to investigate the lock from this side.
Very good.
From the shiny end, yes. Perfect.
So there you go. How many people, we would love to know, how many people already got a lock open? Awesome. How many people keep that, if this is your first time getting a lock open? Look at that. That is so rewarding to us. We love this. We love this. So on all of those practice locks, either direction will work. Others, they're a little more specialized. They'll only turn one way. Just ask us. And if you're just starting out, if you weren't one of the hands, it's just not working for you, here's what we recommend. If you really want to kind of dial in your touch, your feeling, find a number one that only has that one pin step, and try the following exercise. Reach in there with just a pick tool. No tension tool, no turning pressure at all. Just a pick tool, and feel that first pin. And there's no mystery. You can practically look in there and see the pin. And feel it, right? So you feel like you can feel the spring compressing. Pretty loose, though. Take your pick out, put a turning tool in. Now you've got some turning pressure, right? So you've got a binding pin somewhere. But you don't have to guess where's the binding pin. There's only one pin in the lock. So take your pick back in, try to lift. You should feel a difference. You should say, oh man, they weren't kidding around. Look at this. This is dragging. This is kind of friction. Take your pick back out, take your turning tool back out. Just try it alone. Just the pick. Feel it loose. Add some turning pressure. Feel it again. See if you can feel that friction. Learning the difference between a binding pin with that friction and a non-binding pin that's loose is what you want to train yourself to feel. And if you can feel that, then you can get to that point where, as Fitz was showing you earlier, that hunting around, did that slide make sense? Why you can hunt around and find some binding pins and some that aren't? That's what you're learning to feel. That's what all this is trying to get your hands to understand. A binding pin versus a non-binding pin. And if you can feel that, it's simple. How you handle the tools, how you move your tools, whether you're directly lifting or rocking lifting, whatever's comfortable for you, that's fine. Do that. There's no real wrong way if it's working for you. But overall, keep the following in mind. Relax, relax, relax. If it is not working, if anything is getting stuck, you are probably trying way too hard. Talk to your neighbor, say, hey, oh my gosh, this was such an amazing, how did you find about this workshop? I don't know, but it certainly wasn't from that article. That was crap. That should be. No, just talk to other people. Ask, oh, how'd you come here? And before you know it, things will start opening. You're like, oh, I wasn't. How'd that happen? Well, you weren't overthinking it. Relax. Not too much turning pressure. Not too much lifting pressure. Remember, you don't want to overset. And of course, if you get a lock open, you have to say, open! So we know that we're actually teaching you something, and the people around you know it's possible. And we love to hear that. We love to start to hear open, open, open as things go. So ultimately, we have a lot more we can cover. How are we on time? We're like 45 minutes in, maybe? 30 minutes in?
We're 45 minutes, exactly. Yeah.
Good. So we will have a lot of extra time. But we're going to keep taking break points, and we'll throw in extra material as we go. But are you enjoying it so far?
Yeah.
You glad you came so far? All right. You're not scared of all this nefarious stuff going on so far? All right. The tool shirts, all of us, we're going to mingle for a little bit. We want to have questions from you. And we want you to keep trying, and then we'll throw some more content at you as we go along. Great. So,
David. Nice to meet you.
Those are just tick marks around the time you have been used. So you can pick up the light bar.
Are they hard? But they say tough.
They say tough, but it doesn't mean
So I'm going to show you rate.
Rocket one rate.
So I'm just going to borrow this one.
6 starts to get a little bit hard, but it's still possible.
They talked about how so I just combination turning to very light.
We'll talk about it. Most American sites are you may have discussion there's one that has it as well, but really doesn't matter. It's more difficult, but what gets hard is when they start using different technology. They get their security codes and that. Yes.
Oh yeah, I see if you do a certificate. If this does not go in by the third attempt,
Electronic locks can do that. Electronic locks, yes, they can do that. But for mechanical locks, they'll show you that with security. But they fool you into thinking that you've already set the binding pin, but it's not set. It's still stuck. I think so.
Well, you can either hold in your hand, or left-handed or right-handed. Okay, hold the lock in your non-dominant hand.
So really your defense is from the little shackles, the plastic hold everything together.
No ridges on the wall. Maybe it's might be higher. Some sites, they have
So this one,
where's that running?
come back.
This one took like 2 minutes. But no, how long did it take you to run? One minute I got
So what happens is,
who is this? No, those are just the
No, you might have
I think we'll have that. Yeah.
But you also have to put the L. You have to put the L for that.
So the gentleman with the silver hair is the coordinator of the
Okay, let me watch
pretending to be a
Is this the right way? Oh, I almost got it. One pin left.
tend to see some people everyone here is great.
You have any empty.
I'll do the turn. You do the pick. Stick it in.
Yeah, it's
tip up.
great to see this.
Tip up.
So if there's any
Tip up. You're pointing to tip down. Oh. Do that in the last section. Do it all by yourself. Right-hander or left-hander?
One can
Not necessarily.
we're going to keep going with a lot more materials.
And I own that now.
Excellent. Why don't you try?
It is. We will mention that in a section towards the end. But yes, there it is. For what? Most states have different statutes with respect to automotive entry and automotive tags. We don't know as much about those laws because that's outside the scope of sport picking. We've had our lawyers research state laws. I do know that almost every state has its own way of treating those tools. And it's usually more harshly.
Excellent.
More harshly. So a slim jim is usually much more questionable territory than a market.
I would slide in and out.
Well, you might. It depends on the state law if the tool you were using is legal. You couldn't get in trouble for breaking into your own car, but possibly if you were in possession of the wrong tool as you did, you might have some more explaining to do. We can't speak knowledgeably about that. Yeah, I would assume that it's probably very good.
when you reset, so when you turn it the other way, all will fall back down. You can count the number. Well, don't get the mix up.
Unfortunately, no. What has changed usually has been people's understanding of the laws. There's a whole lot of, I heard they're illegal, or I talked to the police and they told me they're illegal. There's a lot of that. But ever since we actually paid legal teams to go through all 50 states, it's like, wow, this is the law? Huh, they are legal. Oh, they're legal in DC. Oh, they're legal here.
How's it going?
They are legal in California. California's relevant penal code is section 833.336. Subsection 3 specifically details burglary tools or instruments of burglary. And they detail everything from lockpicks to crowbars to vice grips to et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a whole swath. Well, all of these tools are listed, but the statute specifically says they are illegal if possessed with burglarious, which is a great word, burglarious intent. Most states in the country treat lockpicks with an intent clause, and we will show you a map further along with all the different state laws.
Open.
Nice.
A 5, 6, 8.
How you doing, man? Which number are you working on? 6? So you got up until 6, all right. Awesome.
How long does it take you to get score?
Have you tried it?
Other town
Live left.
It's the easiest way to.
Has anyone tried the scale here?
I guess they all do. Can take this and absolutely.
So we're looking for what is the
I think that I have to.
Yeah.
Numbers on these things, how many fish?
2 has 2, 3, 4. After 4, they just all have to. No, they have 5 and 6. So this is the scale that we were talking about earlier. It might amaze you. Between a quarter or a half an ounce of pressure is all you really need. And try to tackle that with your finger and see.
Do it.
Yeah, just with your finger. This is the pressure you want for the turning trade. And it will amaze you how little pressure you actually need.
You need to hold that firmly with 2 fingers of your teeth. Yes.
All right, power on.
Hard. How
You might try a lower profile.
Let's,
Yeah, it might be a little bit easier there. May I make a suggestion? In fact, I'm not just on camera. The raise is great point, but I want to make sure everyone can see.
oh, first
May we make one comment about holding the locks? I'm going to do something on camera here.
way too much
So,
horsey noises.
how many of you remember which side is the side you're supposed to be attempting to manipulate? Is this it? All right.
silver side?
Now, just because that is the side you're working on, it does not mean that this side is fully irrelevant. This tailpiece is still connected to the plug. And in fact, if I wiggle this, you can see that. So if I'm holding this in my hand, you don't want to kind of ball it up in your fist. Even though this is free, I'm effectively holding the plug shut without realizing it. Try holding the lock with your hand nice and open and nestling the lock into your fingers like this. So the tailpiece is free and not disturbed. That way, you can still put very gentle pressure on this without compromising that tailpiece, without blocking that tailpiece. So consider that when you're holding the locks, because you don't want to be inadvertently holding it shut from the back side. Thank you for letting me steal that for a moment.
How's it going?
I was stealing locks too.
We're all nefarious.
I got them all.
Cool. And what did you say?
I only got one so far. I'm still working. You got them all open?
That's confusing. She's good.
I could bring it to my own house if I ever get locked out. I already paid $250 a lock.
It kills me. Our rule is, I'm organizer of the key chapter. Feel real yes. So when I lock myself out of my apartment, it's just
You actually made one?
Good.
So a lot of you have gotten past some of the easier locks. How many people have gotten, let's say, at number 3 open? It's hard to ask you to raise your hands when everyone's doing this. How many people have gotten a 4 or a 5? How many people are wondering, are harder locks out there? How do you make locks better? For that, we are going to turn to Dr. Tran for a moment, who will tell you about pick-resistant locks. Dr. Tran, the man from China, whose parents came through Vietnam, who now lives in Switzerland and is wearing a Texas hat. So, the melting pot incarnate, Bay Area, there you go. Pick-resistant locks with Dr. Tran.
So there are actually a few things that manufacturers and companies can try to do to make locks harder to pick. There are 2 main things, which I'll touch on. So the first thing they can do is actually change the shape of the keyway, the little slot that the key goes into. Now here's an example of a pretty simple keyway. It's pretty straight and it's wide. So you're able to use the various tools that you have on the table very easy. There's a lot of space for your tools to maneuver and manipulate those pins. So what companies can do to make it harder is to start to change the shape of the keyway. They can make it more narrow. It's still straight though, so there's still room for your tools to fit in there. However, now you may have to use maybe a thinner tool. A thinner tool may bend more easily, may break more easily. Then you have complex keyways. Now they start to get really thin and then they start to have curves. The intent of these curves is to cause your tool to kind of get stuck on these sharp, jagged edges and curves. So that way it's harder for you to manipulate. It frustrates the person who's picking them up. Yes?
But if that guy's gotten stuck, it'll also frustrate the key too.
Yeah, so yes, the key could be harder to put in, or the key could break if it gets thinner, because the key has to be thinner as well. And then you have really hard keyways, just lots of crazy angles, not a lot of space for tools to go into, And then of course you have fiendish, really crazy overlapping boards.
That's a real keyway.
So some of you may be thinking, okay, why don't all keys look like that? Well, I alluded to it earlier. The keys start to get thinner. So when they get thinner, they're less reliable. They can break more easily.
What does the key to that look like?
Very interesting is
Yeah.
the answer. That is a lock by Gege, a company that's a subdivision of a popular in Austria.
When you went in there, when you felt it, you go
So
all the way in,
manufacturers
you feel
could make the keyway thinner,
That's kind of
with more angle, curve, overlapping boards, but it becomes more expensive.
just kind of
Yes.
a little bit.
But can't you just make the key out of strong material then?
Yes, it's more expensive.
Oh,
Stronger metal, it's more expensive. So maybe instead of using brass, they may use nickel silver, which is a more alloy, but expensive. And if you go back to manufacturing tolerance, remember, the tighter the tolerance is, the more expensive a lock is. Most locks in the US you can buy for $20 to $50. That's very cheap. In Europe, an average lock costs about $300. So now we go into the second thing that manufacturers can do, is to start using pit-resistant pins. As you can see here, this is not a cylinder. This pin is not a perfect cylinder. In fact, it's a spool shape. We call this a spool pin. So when you try to turn the plug that has a spool pin, you can see the plug is turning, but it's now binding against the inside of the spool. So if you try to lift a spool pin, it'll get stuck. So that's one way manufacturers can make it more difficult to pick. Now remember, this is pick resistant, not pick proof. So to pick a spool pin or a security pin is to actually use even less tension on your turning tool than before. In fact, so little tension that the force of you lifting the pin stack causes the plug, if you notice here, to rotate backwards just a little bit before the rest of the pin stack, before you meet the shear line here. So the trick with security pins is to use even less turning pressure. So little that the force of lifting the pin stack causes the plug to rotate backwards. Yes?
Are all the pins full pins in a lock?
No, generally it would be one or two, would not be all. Because if it's all the pins, that just gets into a really weird situation where the plug can turn a little bit, like 5 or 10 degrees each way, and just slap you for the lock.
So one way would be to figure out which one it is, and
Yes.
be extra careful with that.
Now, of course, going back here, so of course, if the plug is rotating backwards, you may reset some of the pin stacks you've already set. So you may have to go back and reset some pin stacks. So this does frustrate whoever's trying to pick this lock. Then you have a slightly different design for spool pin. This one's more of a mushroom shape, but it does the same exact thing. And then you have serrated pins. So you're going to feel a little notch and lip all the way through that driver pin.
But could a serrated pin aid the lock picker, so they would kind of have that feeling?
But you don't know when. You don't know when it's at the shear line. Because you wouldn't have all serrated pins. Actually, if you had all serrated pins, that would be a nightmare. And then here, we call this a sneaky pin.
Yeah, that's what Hanfei calls it.
So here's another design where now the key pin is sort of a mushroom shape, and the driver pin is a completely different shape. And there's also milling inside of the plug to cause it to get stuck. Of course, again, this is very expensive to manufacture, but some manufacturers will employ technologies like this.
That's a Swedish lock.
To stop lock pickers. Another double mushroom pin, very similar to a spool pin.
This one's Norwegian. The Scandinavians have some great lock designs.
Are there any pitch-proof locks?
We usually say that's kind of a loaded term. Are there? It's like saying, is there an unhackable computer? Is there a password that can't be cracked? It's never an issue of. It's like saying, is there a wall so tall that no ladder can get over it?
Yes. Run out of all the or everything.
That's a great way of putting it. Yes, it's possible that you could make something so insurmountable that it's not practical to attack. But as of right now, there's only a handful of locks, maybe 3 or 4 well-known models, that we might call no publicly known attack or vulnerability. There are not too many, and you never want to say it's ironclad forever, because you can't be sure. Question?
Where do we buy those?
Great question. Where do you buy such locks?
How much do you want to spend?
How much do you want to spend? And is it worth it? Putting a lock that is $200 and has no known attacker bypass on your front door, that's fine, but who's actually attacking your front door? Someone who's probably going to try to kick it or kick the window or throw a rock. Now, if you want to put a safe in your house and you want a lock on that safe, now you start getting into this kind of question. There was a hand and then a hand. Your question? And then I will come back to your question.
So how does the lock on the car work? Because there's a chip inside, right?
So automotive locks are rather outside the scope, obviously, of a lot of sport picking. Electronic locks and chip locks, it's so different than the mechanical systems. We don't get into that a whole lot. There's a lot that can be said, and there's a lot of cool videos online if you look, car locks, how these work. It's unfortunate. I hate to say it's outside the scope of this kind of a workshop. They work differently, is the next answer I could give. To address your question, where do you get interesting locks? Usually from either very specialized locksmiths or from online distributors. Locksmiths in the US will sometimes sell Medico locks or multi-lock brand locks, both of which have some known attacks. Unlikely that any street-level criminal would ever know these attacks. And it's unlikely, you guys know this, we've actually talked to a lot of police. Ask your local police force, when's the last time you saw a burglary that involved lockpicking? They won't have a case probably on file ever. The only burglaries that ever really involve lockpicks, or you're talking art theft, you're talking corporate espionage, high-end attacks. So a locksmith selling a Medico or a multi-lock is quite fine. We're very, very enamored with a brand from Finland called Abloy. The Abloy lock, which is sold not by too many brick-and-mortar locksmiths. Security Snobs is really... SecuritySnobs.com is a high-security lock manufacturer. Full disclosure, we know them personally. We're on a first-name basis. We're not trying to throw them business.
How much do they go for?
How much do they go for? Let me grab... Where's the case? My case is back there. My case has an Abloy lock that I'll show you, which was about $30. And they can go as high as $300.
How do you spell it?
A-B-L-O-Y is Abloy. So this, for simple luggage security, that is about a $30 or $35 lock. And this is the key.
Now you have to remember, the lock, there's no known vulnerability for the lock to be picked, but someone can still take a bolt cutter and cut that.
Right. But I have the peace of mind, I fly with these locks on my luggage. So when I get my luggage from the baggage carousel, I say, oh, all right, the lock has not been cut. I am pretty darn sure that no one's been in there. It acts like a seal, kind of.
What does the TSA feel about that?
The TSA... I find the firearms everywhere I fly, so it's different. So you can pass that around a little bit. Do a lot of things, yeah. I gave a whole talk about it. Yes, question, right? You were waiting patiently. Please, go ahead.
The really powerful locks, you said the Abloy locks, which is unpickable.
No known attack, currently.
No known attack only costs $35, but the average lock in Europe costs $300.
Yes.
A lock for a door costs.
For a door.
Yes.
Abloy locks for a door, you're talking €200 or more, maybe. But that little padlock, I love that little padlock.
Have you actually been able to get this open?
No, there is no known attack other than compromising the key.
Have you tried?
Mechanically, it's honestly a mathematical thing. There is no way of applying tension to that lock in a way that it will leak information back to you. So no one has tried, because once you try, it's a lock that once you try to put under tension, everything seizes and you can't manipulate the individual components separately from one another.
So bumping...
I can throw it, let me actually throw it up there. I'll throw it on the screen real quick.
Oh, sure.
So things like bumping doesn't work either?
Right, bumping, there's no, because this isn't even a pin-based lock. It's a disc-based lock.
You know, I wish I just had my cutaway.
Oh, that would be sweet.
Why don't everyone use that technique? Do they have a patent?
They do have a patent.
They
yes.
do.
They have a patent. It's also it's expensive to manufacture. Those discs are the tolerance on those little discs are very, very high. So, and there's 11 of them. There's 11 little copper. Is it copper?
They're probably a phosphorized bronze.
Yeah, I think there are copper blocks.
Yeah.
There are 11 discs in it. So if you think about a safe lock that has three numbers as a combination, because it has 3 discs, this has 11 inside.
Wait, is there some issue with the lifetime of the lock since it's phosphorized bronze? I mean, over time, it wearing out just from just normal use?
Well, it's usually that's to resist corrosion or breakdown.
But I'm just wondering, just in terms of hardness, right? I mean,
They have different techniques and variations of that lock for bad environments. The water may get in dirt. So they have different versions for different applications. So like on a military one that goes on a container, like on a ship with a salt water, there's going to use different materials. And because of that, the design may be different. There may be less discs or something like that.
Is there ever any issue with like difference in hardness between the materials used for the keys and with the pins and over time?
Yeah, absolutely.
Watch wearing. So that's what I was trying to get at with that particular
There's a lot
lock.
of metallurgy that goes into it.
Keep this in there without
doing this to the little pins all at the same time on this, and
Because
make
people
sure that
estimate
your
pressure
apply pressure so that it throws it. So as soon as it gets that one,
It's what time is it?
This one
It's about 6 feet. It's a little less than halfway through. How has it been with us throwing other lessons at you while you're trying? Is it all right? This pace? Yeah. You guys had enough opportunity to ask. We don't want to be breezing by you. I hope if anyone has questions, just keep throwing them up. There's a question and then one more.
I actually have a key I would like you to talk about.
There you go.
Okay.
It looks like this sidebar.
It's a pretty cool design.
I'll find the house you pick the lock.
That is a Medico.
Let me get my keys.
So the gentleman has a Medico key here. And when this camera hopefully autofocuses in. There we go. It looks rather like a conventional key. But Medico locks, if you look at the top of the key, they actually are not straight bitting cuts. The cuts have angles to them. Because inside of a Medico, and this is getting into a little bit high security territory, the pins don't merely traverse up and down, they also spin side to side. So the key is both lifting and, come on, focus. Did you see it? Was it there? So the pins are actually lifting and spinning because it's not just a basic pin tumbler mechanism. It is a pin tumbler coupled with what will be called a sidebar. And it's a very nice design. Not completely unpickable, but pretty close.
Hi.
And then he was waiting as well. Yes.
I have yet another type of teeth. It's got an extra set of teeth on the inside.
Ah, I think I know what you mean there.
Primus?
Probably.
Whoops, that's a fail. Sorry.
No problem. So yes, you were right. Schlage Primus. So regular conventional bitting teeth, and also sandwiched in an additional row of teeth halfway down the lock. That is essentially a main stack of pins and then a whole other series of pins coming in from the side. It's like 2 locks in one. And as you might imagine, pins coming in down from the side, much harder to get in there with your picks and manipulate when it's a way of isolating where the binding action is happening and separating the binding action through orders of removal. A nice design, also backwards compatible with conventional Schlage locks. So if that's your door, if you have a shed out back, you could have a regular Schlage lock just interacting with the top, and your doors interacting with both, so they could be key to light, but cheaper out back. It's a nice design. They have been compromised in different ways, but we won't get into too much about that. They don't break down quite as much. No, their Schlages are pretty nice in general. Oh, yeah. Has anyone ever seen keys that look like this? That's what we call dimple keys. Same type of mechanism, simple pin tumbler mechanism, but the pins are interacting with the flat side of the key. Again, this is just harder because reaching into that lock, if you want to pick it, your pick has to kind of reach in the narrow direction and kind of push. Much harder to attack, but functionally rather similar. Usually any manufacturers with this sort of design, they've thought more about security. You can rest assured and be confident that there's probably a lot of those anti-pick pins in there. Again, you can see the name brand on here. This is Kava. Kava or Kava Ilko is the Kava group. They're probably the second biggest name in locks, second after Asa. So there's a lot. Is it really making sense to you why we find these devices so fascinating? There's no end to how these manufacturers do interesting and unique stuff. So because a few people asked, and the term has gotten popped around a little bit, the term bumping, we like to cover a few details about lock bumping. What it is, how it works, and how to prevent it. Can everyone see all right if I'm standing here? So bumping attacks, these fall pretty squarely into that second category that I described earlier. The sort of quick entry, limited skill, no real sporting value. TOOOL is happy to educate the public because that is part of our mission, but we don't provide the means to do bumping attacks. We don't sell bump keys or anything like that. What is a bump key? Why does it work this way? Well, essentially, bumping is just using some very basic Newtonian physics. Right now, in this illustration, we have some billiard balls. And imagine, if you will, the cue ball coming in. Shout it out. What's actually going to move if I shoot this cue ball? The two. Newtonian transfer of energy. Bam. The 2 moves, the 3 stays relatively put. That is what principle is involved if someone is using what's sometimes called a snapper gun. If you see kind of spy magazines and stuff, sometimes they have these for sale in the back. They're called pick guns or snap guns. This long needle is inserted into the lock, and when you pull the big handle, the needle smashes on the pin stacks, trying to get the blue pins, the driver pins, to jump out of the way quickly. And as you might imagine, if you can create a gap very quickly, just the right time, you can try to turn that plug with no pins blocking. Does that make sense? It's not that, that's not really that reliable. We've had people bring them around and say, hey, I saw one of these, I bought this, does this work? It's like, all right, we snap for one, maybe it'll work on a cheap lock. You're not going to see them in competition, they're not allowed during picking competitions. But physically, that's what's happening. A bump key, and if you've seen bumping in the news, it's got a lot of us have been in the news at our local TV affiliates talking about bumping. Bumping is the use of a key with some small ridges to accomplish the same thing. Knocking the key into a lock very quickly, hoping to bounce all those pins, to shoot those pins up very rapidly. And there's different ways of cutting and preparing the keys. Again, it's sort of outside the scope of what we do. But if you can understand the physics here, that's all that bumping is. It's knocking the pins apart very quickly, simply because the mechanism isn't that complicated, and the physics involved is very straightforward. So this has been an attack known to locksmiths for, I'm going to say, 80 years, almost as long as the pin tumbler lock's been around. Some locksmiths would call it wrapping, where they would have these specially cut keys, and if they were servicing a lock at their workbench, they would put the key in the lock and kind of wang it on their desk and try to turn the cylinder. Eventually, though, this knowledge spread out to the wider world, and TOOOL in Holland, where TOOOL is from, TOOOL is originally Dutch. If you're ever curious, why do you guys spell organization with an S? Well, that's because we're a European group at heart.
There's 3 O's.
Yes, there are 3 O's because why? You have to practice what? Over and over and over again. But the Dutch guys put out a wonderful paper. Barry Wells and Rob Progrip, they put out this article called Bumping Locks, which detailed a lot of different attacks relating to bumping with not just basic old-fashioned, jumbo locks. I mean, these are high-security locks, and they still just have the basic pin design. Because manufacturers of all kind of locks weren't thinking of this attack. They just weren't planning for it. And only recently, it might sound like a little bit grandiose of us to say, due to the increased awareness of groups like us, and Locksport International, and other friends of ours talking about this, the public became aware, the public started to get concerned, and manufacturers who had been ignoring this problem for decades responded. Bumping is not a very nice thing to do to a lock. You should be aware, even though we don't sell bump keys, but you might buy a bump key somewhere else online. Don't just start doing this to all the locks you own because it is damaging. But damage aside, it is actually a pretty easy attack to defeat with small changes. Many news articles that treat bumping, like you have, so bumping is a real problem, isn't it? And a locksmith, they'll have them say, yes, it certainly is. We know about this. People really should protect themselves getting a bump-proof lock. And the reporter will say, well, how much does that tend to cost? And they're being honest. The locksmiths will say, well, high-security locks aren't cheap. You're looking at $75, $100. That's valid. Many high-security locks can't be bumped because of the way the mechanism works. We saw that alloy earlier. That's not going to be bumped. Question?
So you mean the bump-proof things that picking them, there is no public attack. The bump is just you just can't.
Right. So that alloy with the discs. I mean, there's no pins in the alloy. They're not separated, so you're not going to bump an alloy. But it is possible to make a lock very bump resistant for far less money. And here's one example. The Master Lock Company is starting to do this for some of their locks. They'll leave a gap. They'll have a pin that can't drop all the way down. And if the pin is not touching the key pin, no transfer of energy, that pin's probably not going to bump up. This is something we love, the Ilco anti-bump kit, anti-bump driver pin, replacing one or more of your driver pins with a low mass, little kind of looks like a nail, and coupled with it is usually a high pressure spring. I think we even have a photo here. Now this will kind of jump if you try to hit it with a bump attack, but it will jump so quickly and crest and fall back down before the other pins have even completed their ascent. You add one or two of these into a lock, it's easy to retrofit these in. It'll change the timing so much that none of the pins are all up at the same time, and it frustrates bumping very effectively. So yes, you could buy a high security lock for $75, $100, or you could look into this Ilco anti-bump replacement pin set. Not $100. Dealers are getting them for under $10. The actual list price from Ilco is under $20. You've got a locksmith, you're going to pay for some of his or her time, of course. But installing these into your existing locks that don't have to be rekeyed, very simple to do. And it's at this time we really want to cover something that is near and dear to us. And that is dealing with a really nice locksmith alleviates almost all of these problems, all of these weaknesses. A lot of people think that there's animosity between us and the locksmith world. And it's true, they don't understand us very well, and some of them kind of look at us quizzically. But we have really good relationships with a lot of locksmiths. Some of our members are locksmiths. And if you ever have questions about this stuff, you say, oh man, that tool workshop, it really got me concerned, go find a nice, reputable locksmith, and they'll talk to you all about this. They like it when people are taking security seriously, because it's easier for them to justify. They'll say, well, there's the $20 lock, or there's the $35 lock, or the $50 lock. They like it when a consumer says, you know what? I've got $5,000 worth of electronics in my house. I'll spend an extra $35. They like that. So what is a reputable locksmith? That's the logo that you need to see. ALOA, the Associated Locksmiths of America. If you are dealing with someone who is an ALOA member, they are a good person. They have been vetted, they have an ALOA number, they have credentials. And something that ALOA deals with all the time is actually the problem of rogue locksmiths. And it's a touchy subject. It's hard. Open, nice.
Right.
Which number was that?
5.
5? Ooh, solid, man. The problem, open over there. I love this. This is a great day. The problem of just, I'm going to open the yellow pages and find a locksmith. How many people have ever flipped through Yellow Pages and seen like AAA lock or Alpha Acme lock? You know, just these listings that just look a little shady. You know, it's you guys have the right radar in your head. You pick it like, boy, that doesn't look really normal. Some of the ads are nice. You know, Bob Jones lock, a Loa number, a Loa logo right there. But a lot of these Yellow Page listings, for lack of a better term, if you permit me to say, are not locksmiths. They are people masquerading as locksmiths, but they are mobile-only locksmiths, or they are sort of locksmiths. You know, like, is this a good locksmith? Look, it's right in their name. Good locksmith. I don't know. Do they have a Loa number? Do they have credentials? Are they bonded? Hard to tell. At least they are a store, like they are a brick and mortar building. A lot of locksmiths aren't even that. Like, would you trust this guy? It says right in the van, locksmith. Covered. I don't know. I don't see a Loa number. The problem of preying, it sounds so rude to say, but preying on desperate people, usually late at night, is a real issue in the industry. And Loa is working so hard to combat these people that give the trade a bad name. Like, this is a funny looking van, right? Old time, like, what is this thing? But look at that. Bonded, here's me, a Loa logo right on the guy's van. I would trust this van way more than I would trust this one. And Loa puts out bullet points. They put out advice if you're worried about the problem of is the locksmith you are dealing with legit. Think about the following. First of all, do they have the Loa logo? Will they give you their Loa number? You can look up and check if someone is actually an Loa member. Loa has the list. Is there a name discrepancy? This is a big one. A lot of these scammer locksmith types will have all kind of different phone number listings, sometimes in the same phone book. And you call it up, and it says, you know, AAA lock service. You call it up, and you get someone who says, yeah, locksmith. Well, they didn't say AAA lock on the phone. They just say, locksmith, what do you need? Where are you? We'll send the guy out. And then a van comes out, and the van is like, ABC lock. And you're like, all right, wait. What actual company are you? And if you don't get a solid answer, if you don't get credentials that say the same thing as the ad said, your radar should pop a little bit. If they won't give you an estimate before they work, if you don't get a nice itemized invoice of what it's going to cost and what something did cost, you might be taken for a bit of a ride. Especially, though, credentials and identification. If you have someone who will not show you credentials or is reluctant to show you credentials that match their van and match their listing, or if you have someone who shows up and doesn't check your credentials and just says, oh, is this the lock that has a problem? Let me get my tools out. Whoa, hang on, sir. Exactly who do you represent? It's a real problem, and you should be aware you always have the right to refuse service. If you are not comfortable, which, you know, if you sat down in a doctor's office and you said, man, you know, my foot is really, I can't walk, I've got a problem, my right foot is hurting me. And the doctor just kind of pulls off your left sock and starts, all right, well, let's, hey, it's the right foot. What are you doing? Well, I'm just going to, let me check this thing out. If you weren't comfortable with a doctor, I think you'd be strong enough of will to say, excuse me, I just remembered I have to be somewhere, and you'd leave. If you were, let's say, going to take one of your kids to a martial arts class, and you say, oh, this is the school, we're going to check out this school, and the teacher said, oh, we don't let parents in. We just let the kids back here, and we're going to hear sounds of kids, hitting each other. Yeah, but we're going to just, what's your name, son? You want to come? You want to try this out? All right. You would probably, for your kid's safety, be like, no, actually, we got to meet some people for dinner. We'll call you. Why would you not do that with a locksmith? Well, unfortunately, the way these people operate, a lot of them know you're probably calling for the very first time when you need help, when you're stuck somewhere, possibly when you're alone. It's a very vulnerable position to be in, and it's very hard to walk away. It's hard at 2 in the morning when a person who's probably much bigger and angrier looking than you is saying, well, I came all the way out here, you owe $54 for the call out. And literally, what are you going to walk away? You can't get in your car or your house. It's a real rough position to be in, but you have the right to refuse. Yes?
But you still have to pay money for driving.
You do not have to pay them to show up according to Loa standards. An ALOA certified, the actual industry practice is, if you were not given an estimate and you do not want service, you do not owe them anything and you can refuse all service. That is what ALOA recommends, and that is your right. But most of this can be alleviated by meeting some locksmiths before you need them. Heavens, please. Walk around your neighborhood. You see a local lock shop that's, a lot of these are multi-generation. They've been in business for their whole lives. They're established community stores. Stop by. Walk in, just say hello. Question, yes.
You know, we've been in a great recession.
Mm-hmm.
Has there been some slippage of some locksmiths gone rogue?
Have some locksmiths gone rogue is the question because of tough times? Rarely. Usually locksmiths that are, first of all, they could lose their ALOA credentials if they start behaving outside of ALOA regulations. Not giving estimates, overcharging, not providing the right service. For the most part, the industry has seen infiltration of people who aren't real locksmiths. But it's I've never heard of a case of an established, legitimate locksmith kind of going bad. The worst that usually happens in tough times is that they have to let people go. They have to downsize staff. They have to reduce their operating hours. But every locksmith I've ever met that's an established business, I've never met a bad one.
Is there someone you just report them to, like if some
Yes.
guys, like?
So if you suspect, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go on.
Do you recommend like calling the police? Like, do you think this?
Oh
guy
yeah. In the moment, if you are standing somewhere you are not comfortable with what someone is telling you and you're feeling pressured, some of these rogue locksmiths, if you actually say, "Whoa, you didn't quote me this. I'm not paying. I don't even have the money to pay you. Go away." Some of them, believe this or not, will offer to escort you to an ATM right now, and you can get the money. Heck with that. Say, "No, you can escort me to my cell phone, and I will have the police." And afterwards, call the Attorney General, call your local law, or call ALOA and report them. They'll help. Question in the back. Rogue locksmiths, people operating as if they were a locksmith without being licensed or bonded.
So what can they do?
What can they do is usually drill the lock. They drill or cut the lock out, and then they will offer to resell you a cheap junk lock for $200.
So they're just taking advantage of it.
Yeah. Right. No, they're just taking advantage of the trade. Yes. Questions?
Is it possible? Are there any other good locksmithing businesses besides the ALOA?
So are there any other trade groups besides ALOA?
That are actually good?
I don't, well, ALOA is not one company. ALOA is a trade association.
Yeah, another trade association.
So I don't know of any other trade association that has the same level of prestige. It's kind of like saying, are there any dentists that are a part of something other than the ADA? I think they're all American Dental Association. Just like I think ALOA really is the name. As far as I know. There might be others. But
oh yeah, but can't guys who really aren't part of the ALOA just get the stamp and put it on the van?
So could someone who's not part of ALOA just get the stamp? They could, but they would be breaking the law. And they wouldn't have an ALOA number to go with that logo. And then a lot of law enforcement entities would want to have words with them. Question in the back. Do most apartment complexes not change locks? I would say, well, I haven't lived in enough apartments to know, and I don't have solid data. I know that it is a problem, that the lack of changing of locks, or telling the customer, the tenant, it's on you if you want to have a new lock, well, you have to pay for it. I know it is an actual problem. Some I would hope do, but personally, anywhere new that I've ever lived, I've always changed locks. So yeah, but by all means, it's like, here's a good question. How many of you, it's an awful thing to say, how many of you have a lawyer, like, that you have ever gotten their card and keep their number in your phone? I mean, none of us are criminals, right? But I know some lawyers. I did jury duty once, and it was the most rewarding experience. And I met lawyers in the courthouse, because you never know what, the moment if you ever need a lawyer, like you were at a bar, and there was a bar fight, and then the police haul everyone outside, and was it that guy or that guy who swung the beer bottle? And all of a sudden you're facing, I need a lawyer. It's much better if you already have their number before you're emotionally invested in a situation. Treat locksmith the same way. Question?
Speaking of apartments,
Yes. So you're asking about, he's asking about master keying, not master the brand, but mastering like the levels, the hierarchies of permission. We have a whole section on master keying. Maybe we'll do that after the next little break here. Yes, if someone can compromise the top master key, that is indeed a problem.
Oh,
one and then two, yes. So why do we have locks on the table that have no keys? Like the combination dial padlocks. They are to provide an example of what is called shimming. And if we had a soda can, we could actually do a demo. I don't know if we have any can metal, but I can show you some slides about that as well. And then yes.
The combination locks,
yeah,
aren't they completely pink-proof? The only way they get you there is basically by being super lucky?
So the combination locks where you know, there are no holes to stick the picks in, are they pick-proof? You could call them pick-proof, but maybe because it's a short section, maybe we'll jump into that right now and talk about combination locks. So, anybody from Pseudo Room, does anybody know, is there any soda can metal anywhere in this whole building?
I'll go look for one.
Alright, we'll look for one. I wish we had some in our kits. We usually keep some can metal. Darn. If we can scare one up, we'll show you a live demo of something. But in the meantime, I'll just kind of talk about it. So, combination locks. How many people have seen a lock like this? Right, it's the most popular lock in America. If you are using a lock like this, we do not like to be alarmist, we do not like to say, oh, the sky is falling. You effectively are doing this. You are asking people as politely as they can to leave your stuff alone.
Oh no, my algebra homework.
Yes. Your algebra homework and your dirty socks, they are not well protected.
Or your $200 calculator.
Right, you never know what's behind these locks, and a lot of people shouldn't be using them. Yes?
There are also probably law implications. In one case it's like breaking and entering, in other cases it's just entering, right?
That's a little bit outside the scope of how I could speak to the law. I know that the law, if you don't know that breaking and entering doesn't have to involve any kind of breaking. If there's a fence, like around an abandoned building, and you want to, like, oh, I'm going to go take photos of this old derelict building, and you kind of move a slat on the fence, that is breaking and entering under most jurisdictions. But that's beyond, you know, this is, I can see why some people don't consider, like, is that really breaking? These are awful. Well, like, why are these so awful in our view? The reason is because of padlock shims. Padlock shims. Absolutely one of the most simple, this is that second category of attack. Quick and dirty, no skill attack that you should be aware of because, oh my gosh, if you can understand just how fundamentally flawed some of these designs are, it'll amaze you. And hopefully, oh wait a minute, do I have any shim metal running? Because sometimes we do demos with these. Oh, tell me I have some. No shim metal. Oh, we have someone looking for cans right now.
What kind of metal would qualify as shim metal?
Thin metal, like the thickness of a soda can or beer can.
Do you want a bobby pin?
I'm sorry?
Would a bobby pin help?
No, a bobby pin is long and skinny. We need something flat. These are padlock shims. Padlock shims can be inserted inside the lock mechanism, right where the shackle is trying to engage, and it just pushes the latch out of the way. Most of these locks, think of them when you have a lock that's open. Do you have to dial the combination to shut it? No, you just slap it shut. And this small notch right here has a small bar that sticks into place. And that notch, that bar just gets pushed out of the way. So, oh, the shackle must be coming down, I better push out of the way. That latch is spring-loaded. So you can take metal, sometimes metal you cut out of a can, slip it down in the lock, and just pop the lock open. It's a real problem. There are actual cases of, people doing this. metal that you can just kind of cut really quickly. We'll show you a demo in a second of me doing this, where I cut and I fold, and before you know it, I've got something that looks very similar to those locksmith shims that you saw earlier. Question right here.
Do they have any issue lock that
Yes, the question was, do they have any locks where this is not susceptible? We'll show you them right after I show you this. Can you look in the black organizer's bag over there, Christina, for scissors? Grab a couple of these in case they're not going to work well.
This bag?
Yes, something should have scissors in there. Or the red bag, but I think they both
tools. Here we go.
Perfect. Hey, just throw them.
Running with scissors.
All right. That was like magic, man. That was awesome. Here you are putting a coat on, ready to go find a liquor store.
Just want some drink the beer.
Here we have a can of Miller Low Life.
I drink it too.
All right. And I'm going to prepare a few pieces of metal because there's a very real chance that this won't work correctly. But if it does, ooh, I think there's going to be some surprise looks. I'm going to cut a few things here.
Actually, I just heard a gym teacher got busted for breaking into the lockers for kids.
So here we have our, and shout at me if I'm not on camera.
That was in LA or something.
Here we have our lock.
Yeah, doing the in the locker and filled with his cell phone.
I've got this little shit.
That was great.
I'm going to try to slip that into the lock. Open. Open. Exactly. Now that, that took a whole 30 seconds. And all because of shimming. It is not hard to conceive of someone just whipping one of those out.
Yeah, that's what you're basically doing.
Now, if all you're protecting is some loose leaf paper or dirty socks, whatever. I mean, does somebody really want that? I don't want to meet the person who wants your dirty socks. But this kind of attack, this simple mechanical attack, how often do you think about this? How often are you maybe relying on a lock like this for an improper kind of situation? It's fine if you're protecting something of limited value. But this was a trailer that friends of ours were driving across country. They were moving. There's a big tech conference called DEF CON, the world's biggest hacker conference. We go to DEF CON every year. We were out there. Someone said, oh man, can you come to like Siviak's house? Dude, yeah, we got a problem with a lock. And I said, oh, what happened? He said, well, we can't get it open. Well, this is one of those locks that's called a break-free padlock, where the shackle actually comes completely off. And if you can see what they did, they were a little bit too quick putting it back together, because the keyway's up here. They said, oh no. And I said, all right, well, it's DEF CON, we had the right supplies. And I didn't even have scissors or anything. I just took my knife out and kind of ripped the can up. Almost cut myself in the process. But I jammed a can in there, and just, sure enough, I shimmed the lock open. And they went, oh my God, we've been driving across country with our whole life in this, trailer. Maybe we shouldn't use that lock. And I said, wasn't your first clue that the lock costs $7.99? But how often, I don't blame them. How often do we talk about this? People ask us all the time, they're like, isn't it just unconscionable that manufacturers could sell locks that are this bad? I don't think so. Because a manufacturer probably sells a nice lock, a medium lock, and a cheap lock, and they're watching the cheap ones flying off the shelves. They're going to produce what the market wants. And it's not your fault, as people who go to Home Depot, how often do you talk about this? If you're not equipped with this kind of understanding, you're probably going to go, well, $25, $10. Hey, I can get a free hamburger if I buy this one. We want to save money. And unless you have a reason to understand why it's so different, you can't make the right choice for the right situation. So what is the right choice? Well, first of all, at least a lock that would be latching on both sides. That's a little stronger. Still shimmable. I would just need 2 shims, and sometimes it's harder to fit the shims in. But ultimately, a lock that isn't using a spring-loaded mechanism, a lock that is not using a latch, but is using what we would call a double ball, is excellent. This is 2 solid ball bearings that do not fall inward unless this cammed control cylinder turns.
Oh, it's unshimmable.
That is unshimmable. That is a nice design. And many times you can tell when a lock is open. You can see these square cut or sort of squared notches, often with a big angle at the bottom. Those angles are helping the spring-loaded spring-loaded clasp click away. Nice, relatively flat bottom, gentle scoop cut. That is something a ball is nestling into. Question?
So how much more like these more secure double ball mechanisms cost?
Question is, how much more can these cost? Often, same price. Depends on the manufacturer. This is a super cheap, and in fact it was easy to pick, padlock. But sure enough, if you look right on the thing, double ball mechanism, stainless steel, etc. You can even look down the hole. You can see the ball right there. So it is possible to find these double ball unshimmable padlocks for pretty cheap. You can find really nice locks, really harder to pick, big high-end locks. Hopefully they also have some kind of double ball or shim-resistant mechanism. Now, seemingly, there are some people who've just not gotten this memo. You probably wouldn't see this in Oakland, I'm guessing. This was in Canada, so I guess we'll give them a pass on that one. But yeah, using a lock that's easily shimmed or smashed open or something like that, hopefully, after seeing that right now, you will not think of a lock like this as something that you're going to use for a valuable situation. Christina's holding up a nice lock. Is that a Master Pro series?
This is an American.
Oh, an American 700 series, so yeah. That, again, that's a proper lock. Not just from physical brute forcing, but you're not going to see shimming, you're not going to see a lot of attacks against that. Question?
How about handcuffs, traditional?
Handcuffs are an interesting question. They're certainly not in this section. We didn't bring any handcuffs with us. Handcuffs, there's a lot of fun videos online if you want to understand. Because maybe you're thinking of a handcuff shim as a type of tool that a lot of these catalogs have. You can do a lot of interesting things to handcuffs, but it's kind of outside the scope of lock sport, so we don't really get into it.
What about bike locks? Your regular kryptonite lock, that video we've all seen and all that.
So like kryptonite, your bike lock. Again, most street-level thieves are not manipulating the locks at all. They're just trying to cut the lock or force it off. In fact, a very, in my opinion, kind of sad video. Have you ever seen, maybe some of you have seen this. There were 2, I think they were brothers in New York City, and they were tired of getting their bikes stolen or so forth. And they just started trying weird things with their own bikes and their own locks, where one of them would kind of like hide behind a mailbox and roll footage. And one brother, locked up to subway stairs, where you're never supposed to lock your bike, right? Because they'll tow it. But one brother walked up, to broad daylight, rush hour, people going in and out of the subway. He just walked up with bolt cutters, cut the lock, kind of pulled it out of there, and then biked away with the bolt cutters. And nobody said anything. And then, he came along later, and then he said, all right, well, that was pretty fast. So then the other brother was filming, and one brother took a hacksaw, and he sat there, and hacksaw for 2 minutes, just sawing, and people are just kind of, what's up with that? Nobody said anything.
There was a social experiment that actually built on that.
Mm-hmm.
If it is a hot woman using the hacksaw or the bolt cutters, people will come help.
So if it was a woman doing it, people help. I can see that. And if you see the video, by the way, the ultimate end of it was they found a street light or something with AC power that was the little panel was not shut. So they walked up with an angle grinder. They plugged it in, and I think they even panned to a cop and panned back, and the guy and sparks going everywhere, and he pulls the chain off, and bikes away. Nobody said anything. So if you're worried about a bike, that's more of what you're worried about. But there was something about the old kryptonite, the tubular key.
Yeah.
The tubular key was compromised. The Bic pen attack is funny. Look up Bic pen tubular lock. Most modern bike locks use a rotating disc design, like I showed you that Abloy key. A lot of them use a simplified version of that now. which is a lot harder to attack. Was there a hand behind you, or was that, okay, there was a hand here.
What about the ones that lock your steering wheel?
Like the club?
Yeah.
The steering wheel lock? Most of those are wafer locks. We didn't touch on wafer locks, did we? It's a really short section. Let me address that for you.
Yeah. That's how they get the
Normally be. That's because a wafer lock has a plug with thin wafers or plates of metal running through the whole plug. The mechanism is in the plug, not up in the housing somewhere. So it behaves kind of similarly and looks pretty similar as well. But in terms of actually how it functions, to lock and unlock, it's a little different. You have these pieces of metal that can be raised or lowered to different heights. And if they're just correct in the middle, the plug will turn. It's actually a much more simplistic mechanism, but if you're sticking your picks in there and trying to pick, it's harder to, you can't really finesse these open. You're not going to get a lot of sporting finesse out of it. You're basically just going to rake them quickly and try to get them to pop. And the club uses, locks like this. In fact, a lot of really cheap installations, file cabinets, access panels, those are all wafer locks. Again, they're kind of outside the scope of sport picking because they're so simple, but we wanted you to understand the distinction. So does that make sense? Have you ever seen, filing cabinet locks? That's what they are. And that's what a lot of those club locks and things are. Question here.
There's actually, when you actually think of it, you think that a value is going to be saved as a $500 lock, but all the thief has to do is just cut through the other stuff.
Exactly. Did everyone hear that?
He
You think it's great. Yeah.
High-tech lock.
You don't, I got this amazing, great lock, and a thief, is probably just going to cut around it. Why attack the lock? How many people live in an apartment with a big, heavy door and this excellent lock right on it, but the hallway is drywall? That's the kind of thing that a thief or a street-level criminal will do. They will look for the lowest bar of entry.
Or follow you in.
Or what?
Or follow you in.
Or do a shove-in, or it's awful stuff that some people deal with.
Or even you install equipment incorrectly. So sometimes what I do for my job is I look for instances of that. Really expensive locks that are not installed properly, they work. But then you've completely defeated why they're so expensive, and you can get through the same easy way as a cheap lock.
Yeah. Did today something we try to always, emphasize, and we've been explaining it a lot to the press recently. Those of you here today, does it make sense why a criminal would not sit through this 3 hours and learn this?
Number 2 is too easy to deal with it.
Exactly. This is an intricate skill that takes time. It's an act of passion. Someone who wants to steal stereos is breaking in, literally breaking in, or maybe bumping. There's very little evidence collected on what sort of statistics of bump key use is, because a lot of bump key situations are misunderstood. They're thought of as, well, you may have someone else must have had a copy of the key, or you left your door open. We'll talk at the end. Hopefully we're going to make time. We're going to start throwing more at you. There's a whole cool section on forensics. If you're interested, it is possible to tell if a lock was bumped, or picked, or any number of other things. What if, let's see, you know what? Who would like to see some of the forensic images? Because I think they're really cool. Now we want to make sure we get to everything.
I love that dude. That's
that
my boy.
Is not the right section.
That's easy. Remove the handcuff section.
Yeah. There we go.
I can hear the floor.
There's so many slides.
Yeah, we have a lot of slides.
The whole door comes in, yeah.
Okay. Sorry for that mislinked slide there. So, forensics. Really neat stuff, in our opinion. A friend of ours who lives here in California, he lives in Los Angeles area. His name is Datagram. He does a lot of forensics work, and he took some of the photos you're about to see. It's really neat, some of the stuff that he's explored, other friends of ours have explored. In a nutshell, keys will touch the pins and the mechanism of the lock in very specific ways. keys will repeatedly and reliably touch these parts of the lock over and over and over as you use them. And the lock itself will have wear and tear that is predictable. So straight from the factory, when pins are milled, there's this sort of concentric ring pattern usually when the milling of the pin, the fabrication of the pin happens. That ring shape will wear down. It will essentially just polish down over time with use. So these concentric rings, and Datacram sat there one night just doing this over and over and over. After 250 uses of a brand new lock, it starts to get a little smoother. 1,500 uses. Really smooth. He sat there 5,000 times or more, just operating a brand new lock, and you can see, virtually polished clean. And the plug itself, when the driver pins are lifted and the plug turns, those driver pins are riding gently on the plug itself. Those driver pins will start to leave tracks. They'll leave deposits, they'll leave oils, yes?
What about 30,000 uses?
I will ask Datagram if he's hit 30,000 uses or not, and if he hasn't, he will send them to you in an envelope and say, get back to me about that.
Just real quick, do you know what the magnification is or the scale bar at all? Anything like that?
The
So
scale?
what we're looking at?
Christina, do you know, or what is the typical width of a pin?
I would say between 90 mils and 115 mils, depending on the brand.
So
wait, just when you say 115 mils, you're talking about 115 thousandths of an inch.
Correct,
So
yeah, like 0.15, yeah. So this is probably, I mean, well, blown up on a wall like this, I couldn't tell you. This is probably through about a 20 or 50 power lens, I'm guessing. Probably 20 power. But do you see those wear and tear patterns? It's very predictable. It's very like Law and Order, you know, when they say, well, this victim must have been found in the park at least 2 weeks ago because of various insect bites and decomposition. You can do that with locks. You can say this lock has been in the field for this long or has been used this many times, sort of. It's not a precise science, but if, let's say, a rogue locksmith charges you $300 for a brand new lock, and you look at it on the inside, it looks like this, I would get your money back.
So, question.
Yes?
How do you get to that inside to look at it?
How do you get to look at that? You would have to disassemble the lock. In the locks here, and don't do this, please, on our locks, you would actually unscrew that tail cap, and then you would take it apart. You were saying something?
If you are in the area, the next meeting of the San Francisco chapter of TOOL is actually going to address taking apart these style of locks that we're working with. We're going to do a basic tutorial on it.
The next Bay Area TOOL chapter meeting, we'll do field stripping and repainting of locks. So there you go.
So you can talk to me. It's on March 24th, I believe. And
What
it's
is
going
the-
to be in
what is the monthly
Emeryville.
day that you guys meet? I don't
We
know.
generally meet on the third Sunday of the month. Our schedule has been a little bit wonky and off of that, but that's pretty close to where
But you can always go to tool.us to see all the chapters and all the schedules and email any of the chapters. You enter the email, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So the thing about forensics involving picking, in a nutshell, picks will touch places that should not get touched and get scratched up. So look at these two pins, both of which are pretty old and crunky looking. They've been scratched up pretty good just from everyday use. But one of them has a pretty deep gouge in it that does not belong there. Can anyone see which pin it is, you think? Shout it out.
The right one.
I hear a lot of people saying both. But do you see this gouge right here that's thick and wide? That is not from everyday wear and tear. That was a pick or something touching where it shouldn't be touching. Even better photos. Look at these are Datagram's photos again. Look at that pin with these pick marks.
I see 4 or 5.
Yeah, that's not just like him gouging the lock. That's just him picking, gently picking the lock. Or maybe raking the lock. Different actions result in different marks. Question, yes?
Are there plastic picks?
Always comes up right about now the question of what about different pick materials? You will either get, and this is not ironclad, but if picks are made out of softer materials, they either don't perform the job, or they don't leave marks, but they leave material transfer. And he has amazing photos of little shavings of other things falling in 1 and then 2. Yes?
So what if you pick it really roughly, can the pin actually break?
Can the pin break? Not likely, but you know, sometimes you'll get something like this.
Wow.
You can tell somebody's been in there and doesn't know what they're doing.
Can you go back 2 slides?
Yes, I can.
So was that just one picking attempt?
That was one raking attempt, and I think that was it.
So that's what that wavy tool?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's scrubbed across once, and this is a picture of a mixture. So a couple raking attempts, a couple picking attempts around the edge. You can kind of get a feel for how often the lock was picked or not. But Danny Graham even tried, after this wonderful photo, he tried to take a lock that it was a one pin. He went as light as he could, as gentle as he could, just to open it, and he still left a mark. Super light. And that might have even been with, I don't think it was a Teflon pick. I think he took the lightest material he had and just was trying to be so gentle. The point is, it's magnification and cost goes up. But if you have a business and you think somebody picked in and the insurance company, won't honor the claim, talk to a forensic locksmith, which is not the same as like a Yellow Pages locksmith. You can get this documented. This evidence is in the lock. And even things, like snapper guns, bam, 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 smashing on the pins, you can see, look at it, whack, 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 whack. Picks touching in places where nothing should ever touch, way out down by the tail of the lock. You can see scratches and grooves. The tailpiece, if there's a flat cam on the back, it's all scratched up. A key should never touch that. The turning tool, the actual turning the lock, it'll start to pinch in different places. So you can see these little pinch marks down here. One that comes up a lot, more than you'd expect, is fraudulent marks. Some people will, like a jewelry owner, if they're a corrupt jewelry store owner, they'll open their lock, they'll steal their own inventory, and then they'll jam like tools in it. Well, all that ever does is that the front pin just gets completely gouged up, and the rest of the pins look fine. There have been forensic locksmiths who testified in cases about this. You had a hand up as I was going. I apologize. Go ahead.
Is this yours? So is that what they do to sell cheap locks for expensive price?
Is what who does? Like someone who's trying to be a bad locksmith, you mean, or?
No. Do people actually do that on purpose?
Do like damage like this?
Yeah, damage on purpose. Damage on purpose, so their guys actually get bad locks for more price on purpose.
I don't think that they ever do it as a selling technique like that. I think the only time you see this is when someone's trying to fake being robbed.
Why would anyone do that?
Because some people don't believe in working very hard and want to get free money. Now this was the thing, bumping, right? So use of a bump key. Some of us used to think, well, it's a key, right? It only touches the place that the key touches. Bumping must be untraceable. No, actually that's not true. With the right lighting and the right magnification, you can see, a nice big wham. Those are big hits. Bumping leaves marks, leaves different marks. So the evidence is in there. The evidence definitely exists. You just kind of have to find it. Yes, more questions.
Won't the regular key also do damage too?
It does. We wouldn't call it damage. Regular use of the regular key will cause wear and tear, but usually not enough to look that suspicious. The wear and tear that you would expect to see is predictable, and you can tell the difference. So just to make sure we have enough time to keep playing, and that we have enough time to do extra Q&A, we're going to go through some of the summary questions. Some of the summary section, because we want to make sure you understand a few other points, a few other resources, and then it's up to all of us to just let you keep on playing this whole time. So, resources for learning more. Some joker who nobody should listen to wrote some books, ignore him. There are other really gorgeous books. If you just want to see Mechanical High Security Locks by Graham Colford, it is gorgeous. It's old patent diagrams, and it's a beautiful, like a coffee table book if you're into this.
Hey, wait, the album was made by you.
Yeah. It's not one by me. That was the craziest thing ever. When you start getting approached by publishers, and then they say, "Write another book. Write a second edition." It's been a hoot, man. That's why I'm forever going to be known as Deviant, because nobody knows who Brian is. Who's that joke? Oh, it's Deviant? I got his book. Oh, I'll listen to him now. My parents wish, Online, though. Plenty of great videos. Type lockpicking into YouTube. you will get a lot of results. Do not believe everything you see on YouTube, as with everything you read on Wikipedia. Some of it's good, some of it's kind of wrong. Check other places. You can look at all the videos we've been showing on our sites, or all of my videos, all the lectures, tons of lessons like this and other workshops. They all go up on the TOOOL site or on my site. TOOOL in the US and in Holland, we both have websites. The founder of TOOOL, a gentleman from Holland named Barry Wells, he has Black Bag, that's his site. There's a lot, just Google for lockpicking. Take everything with a grain of salt, but you'll probably find a ton of resources out there. There are TOOOL chapters emerging all over the country. These are pretty much all established chapters at this point. Some other groups like Locksport International, the Los Angeles chapter is kind of both groups. As I said, the Bay Area chapter, you have the representatives right here in this room. They would love to have you come out and see it. How many people are from this side of the Bay, from Oakland? How many people are from the San Francisco side of the Bay? So kind of a mix. And it's not, I had never driven in traffic like out here before. I landed.
Hey, what'd you think of it?
Yeah, I flew in at like 450.
Oh yeah,
and all these people were like, "Oh, dude, don't rent a car. Get on BART." And I was like, "I got all this heavy stuff. How bad could it be?" Oh my god. So I don't know how often people ride the 101 or anything, but come over to the San Francisco side, see their meetings. People often ask us, and we wanted to make sure we had time for this, what is the legality of all this? There is a lot of misinformation about this, a lot. But ultimately, we are not lawyers. Nothing we give you now is legal advice, although we have lawyers, very good lawyers, and they've done a lot of legal research. So what we will show you is the best information available, but we encourage you to contact your own legal counsel if you want to be very, very specific. Essentially, federal law is involved if lockpicks are sent interstate. So if you're buying lockpicks through the mail. It is legal to have lockpicks be shipped through the mail or cross state lines if the person receiving the lockpicks is a manufacturer, an auto person, a repo man, law enforcement, or a bona fide locksmith. Anybody take Latin? What does bona fide mean?
Good faith.
Good faith. The actual definition under the law is that anyone with a good faith interest in locksmithing, in lockpicking, anybody with a non-criminal interest is defined as a bona fide locksmith. Again, I am not a lawyer, but there is a reason that BrockageLockpicks.com, Southern Specialties, Southern Ordnance, Searpick, all these people are shipping locks all over the place, including TOOOL, and no one's gone to jail because most lawyers and most state attorney generals and federal prosecutors, etc., have never interpreted this statute to mean locksmiths only. Possession and actual use of these sounds scary, but it usually is covered under the burglary tools statute in every state. Almost every state in the union has a burglary tools statute, which sounds bad until you actually read them, and we have read them all. And they all say things like, no one shall possess a crowbar, key bit, monkey wrench, hammer, rock, pry bar, lockpick, master key, this and that, with nefarious or burglarious, great word, intent to commit a crime with said tool. Almost every state's criminal statute involves an intent clause. If you have possession of anything, hammer, crowbar, and you intend to use it, if the totality of the circumstances gives clear indication of your criminal intent, you are going to have a conversation with people you don't want to have a conversation with. If you are just possessing any of these things, if you walk out of Home Depot with a hammer, and there's no indication that you were doing anything wrong, you are not breaking the law. You are not breaking the law as we understand it, check for yourself, by merely possessing picks if you have no intent to go somewhere you don't belong. Was there a question there?
Yeah.
What is your question?
Because there's a woodwork shop I go to, and if you bought, and if it was illegal to buy things like saws, hammers, that guy would be in jail like 100
Yeah. Did everyone hear that? He said, I go to a woodworking shop, and there's got to be some way to legally buy saws and hammers and everything else. Of course. Because even though those tools are mentioned under burglary tools statutes, it's legal if you're not using them to commit a crime. And if you do have lockpicks or other tools on you during a crime, let's say, like we mentioned earlier, this is kind of a very Bay Area thing, like photography of old buildings, and maybe you're kind of, some people that, well, let me get a better angle. If you're trespassing but you have lockpicks on you, you might be facing felony trespass instead of misdemeanor trespass. So it's important to know the law. Nothing we have done here today is illegal. Nothing you do just by taking, if you have your own picks, you take them home, you walk around, none of that is illegal. As long as you follow those two rules. You don't pick what? Locks you don't own, and it's without permission. And it's also not a good idea to pick what? Your own locks that you rely on.
But it's not exactly illegal, like you can do it.
You could pick your own door.
And you won't go to jail for it.
You probably wouldn't go to jail. You might have to answer some questions. If someone goes, what is that guy doing? You might have to, once you finally get in, you have to get your
But
ID.
if you're a hot girl, they might help you.
Right, that's what I said. If you're a nice-looking person, they might help. If you are curious about other states, if you have friends, relatives, neighbors, anybody from elsewhere, this is the research that we have come up with to the best of our lawyers' ability. And I realize a lot of these colors are the same. Tennessee is the only oddball. We'll get to Tennessee. All the light green, light green in California, light green. Those are legal by statute. The statute of criminal burglary tools is on the books, and they all have an intent clause. If you have no criminal intent, you are fine. Nice. There are five states. North Dakota, open, nice. Arkansas, Indiana, West Virginia, and my home, Pennsylvania. Those 5 states, picks are legal because there is no statute. There is no law treating them or burglary tools at all. There are a couple states, North Carolina, Illinois, Kansas, where picks are legal. They have the same laws as others, but they have interesting subsections dealing with other tools. I know Illinois has a special law just about bump keys. North Carolina has a specific law just about performing locksmithing without a license. So there are certain clauses that if you are very into the culture, research more heavily. I forget why Kansas is on there. They might be another bump key state. Yes?
You cannot perform locksmithing services without a license in this state. That's a felony.
So, Christina points out, California, you can't represent yourself as a trading locksmith. You can't exchange money for services as a locksmith unless you are properly licensed. Now, a few states appear in yellow. Virginia, Ohio, Mississippi, Nevada. In those states, they have the same statute, burglary tool statute. If possessed with intent, it is a crime. They also have a clause called a prima facie evidence clause. Who was my Latin scholar? Anyone know prima facie? Yes. Are you like a loss? Are you an L1 or L2? On its face, the mere possession of pick tools is considered in its own merits, on its own face, as evidence, this sounds bad, as evidence of your ill intent, unless you can counter that with an explanation of your own. And all of these statutes, like read the Mississippi statute, all of these are on our site. It's very interestingly worded where it says, this shall not be construed as evidence of guilt. This shall not be grounds on its own as grounds for a conviction. It is normal for the state to not have to assume private knowledge that is in the possessor's head. It is up to you to say, well, no, I understand you think this is a problem, but here's why it's not. Question here.
But are still professional locksmiths still allowed to use picks in the yellow?
Correct. Professional locksmiths are almost always treated special in the law, not just in the yellow states, but in all the states.
Even the red?
Even the red. In fact, let's get to that tannish red color. Tennessee recently enacted a law that was very strongly worded. It said things like, any possession of picks or trading of locksmith services or blah, blah, blah. It was worded in such a way as to combat the very prevalent problem of scammer, rogue locksmiths operating in Tennessee. They have many big cities have this problem. Tennessee, they decided it was such a problem that they recently worded a very strong statute regulating the possession and use of pick tools. But even then, if you read the statute, it does specifically say in exchange for money or as a paid service. So in a sense, if you were not charging money, if you were not performing locksmithing services, it seems to fall outside of that statute. We have written to the state police. They actually said, you guys are kind of weird. We have no interest in screwing around with you. We've written to the state AG's office for a clarifying letter. If anybody's ever done that, they don't like to generally issue clarifying statements, attorneys general, I'm sorry, should be grammatically correct. But the state AG, maybe they'll write back to us. It's something where we are treating it with caution. There are sport pickers in Tennessee. They are treading lightly. But if you read the spirit of the law in that state, and in almost all these states, is to combat criminal behavior or criminal fraud from scammer locksmiths. Almost always you're okay, but that is our research to the best of our understanding. Christina.
I would like to hear your understanding of Washington, D.C., because my understanding that that's the only place in the country where lockpicks are actually illegal.
That is one of the longest, she's asking about D.C., one of the longest standing and most prevalent myths that we've ever encountered, that lockpicks are very illegal in D.C. Standard state with an intent clause. Burglary tools if there is criminal intent. It shocked us when we read it. We're like, is this new? Are you sure? We had our paralegal like pull the statute again. She's like, no, this is the statute on the book. It's just like, California.
Okay.
So that's the legal picture. But again, ask your own counsel. If you have questions, it's best to be advised by people who are better than us. Acquiring locks. How many people want to keep trying this, by the way? Excellent. Everyone else is busy. I'll assume all your hands went up. Are you still enjoying? Was this a fun workshop today?
Yeah.
Good.
6 is getting completely
6
hard.
is getting hard. Maybe you'll
20
get it. You never
minutes.
know. You know what? Just because if you don't get the 6, you and only because you've been contributing so much today. You get to take the 6 home. You get to take the 6 home, and if you get it, bring it back to a tool meeting, and they'll give you something else. But getting your own locks, if you don't, have little Santa Claus moments like that with Tool. Just look. This really boils down to don't spend money you don't have to spend. Don't go nuts and buy one of everything in the hardware store because you probably just bought 7 of the same thing that have different brands. Look on eBay. Look at like garage sales, yard sales. Look for strange, odd things. Or go to locksmiths and say, hey, do you have any old locks? Maybe locks that don't have keys anymore. And they say, what do you want that for? And you say, I'm an art student, and it's for an art installation, because this is the Bay Area. I don't believe that. Anything is for an art project in San Francisco Bay Area, right? And it's not because you're trying to do something illegal, it's because a locksmith might say, picking locks, that's weird, get out of my store. But, an art project, I don't know, maybe you get more locks that way. These progressive kits, Tool does sell them. We pin them up, and they're on the site. A lot of the stuff we have on the Tool site. The program had mentioned that pick tools would be for sale here at the workshop. They are not for sale here today. We came into this situation today not really knowing what to expect, and with the reaction that was so mixed from the community, we wanted, as a gesture of being sensitive to everyone's concerns, we chose to not sell tools today at the workshop. We still sell them on the site. If you want to transact that way, plenty of sites sell them. You can just stick lockpicks into Google. You'll probably find lockpicks.com, owned by Barrett Rockage, who gets all the business, because you just stick lockpicks into Google and you find his site. But yeah, find stuff through interesting sources. Don't just go buy one of everything you find, because you might be wasting some money. And to loop it all back around into the real world. Oh, I'm sorry, you had your hand up a few times. Go ahead, please.
So, I swear I'm not a plant, but if we buy them from you guys, does it support more workshops like this?
Yes. Tool is supported almost exclusively through sales of our practice equipment and so forth. We don't have any membership dues right now. We will one day, but Tool has been growing in America since about 2004, 2005. The last 3 years has seen a significant ramp up, but we still don't have enough centralized resources to justify, in our mind, charging our membership even like a $10 a year due. Just because we want to have libraries of activities and things. Like, we want to be able to have Fitz and the Bay Area guys say, hey, we really want to do a rekeying workshop. And we'll say, all right, we have the rekeying activity kit, print out a mailing label for that chapter, toss it in the mail. Until we can do that, and right now it's just me and my buddy Babek at the office saying, they want to try what? Yeah, we got some files, send them to them. Write down a note, make sure we told them we have them. Once we get a better library of fun things, we have a lot of neat stuff. We have locks from all around the world. We have people who've given us locks. We want to get them cataloged and properly organized before we justify charging anybody to be a member. So right now, yeah, you're supporting Tool by getting any equipment from us. And we appreciate that. And you're supporting Tool just by coming out to an event like this. We didn't charge Workshop Weekend. They don't give us a cut, but we love the exposure. We love reaching new people and meeting new people like this. So even if you don't buy anything from us ever, you've supported us by being here. How does this all come down to stuff in the real world? Please just keep in mind that criminals in the real world don't pick locks. Criminals do goofy things like this awful choppy video. This was, me trying to simulate, a nefarious stocking cap burglar. That's a shoelace and a paper clip. And me with snow all over my feet in Oslo. So, yeah, I mean, criminals don't pick locks. Criminals bypass locks. Criminals break things. In the real world, this is a criminal lockpick set, Think of the things that you would learn in a police neighborhood watch kind of workshop. Think of how good is it if I have a door that's narrow and thin and doesn't have big bolts, and screws going into the frame. Don't just buy the best lock you can find, even from our friends at Security Snobs, if other aspects of your house and your life are not that secure. How many people know that big sliding glass doors, if they're not locked, you can lift them. Oh, you can lift them right out of the frame. I mean, how do you think they get installed? So yeah, lock the. Don't just put the bar, like that big bar you put down. Don't just put that and be like, I'm good. No, I mean, talk to locksmiths. Talk to your neighborhood watch association. This is how you prevent real crime. The quick and dirty crime, the bypassing, the breaking, maybe bumping. Those are things that you can solve for $10 or just for some common sense. That's what if you're concerned, like, I came to learn about how to keep my stuff safe. Well, I hope we gave you one or two, interesting tips. But much of the lock sport world is kind of outside of that scope. And to kind of conclude, this is the little section we added because we didn't know what people's opinion of us was before we came here today. The mood, we didn't know what it was going to be. We didn't know if we would get swamped by press and community organizers, and we didn't know if there would be people outside. It's California. People will wave a banner and march in a circle and a lot of stuff. Teaching crime is bad. But if you really, you've met us today, and we've shown you some photos of various events where we go and organize. This is a lockpicker. This is a competitive lock sporter. And it's people of all ages, it's people of all demographics, it's men and women and families and kids, just people with an interest in learning and exploring and just having fun. It's a really neat culture. We are not blind to the fact that it is a weird subculture, but you guys, you're in the home of weird, interesting culture. You don't need a justification if you're into something different. You just need someone to come and try it with you, and they'll be like, wow, that's really cool. I want to do that too. So yeah, the competitions, if you ever come and really get serious, find us when we're doing this other events. Open, there you go.
Yeah.
That's the attitude we like. We like people trying this. We like people trying to one-up each other. It's all just puzzles. It's all just an excuse to see whose time is faster and who can, I'm first place and I'm second place, and I bet you can't get this lock, I bet you I can. That's what lock sport is about, and we think it's a good time. And if you thought it was a good time too, we really, really appreciate you sitting down and getting the whole picture, and maybe telling others, telling others what you thought. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you. And now we have a whole half hour.